senior ExxonMobil lobbyist who was under the impression he was being interviewed for a possible new job was actually being secretly recorded by Greenpeace UK. And he admitted quite a bit about Exxon's practices in regard to lobbying members of Congress to ensure that nothing gets done about climate change, and fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil get all the goodies that they want. So this is more confirmation, more reinforcement for something that we've been talking about on this show for well over a decade: how money in politics works and how it works against you, the American taxpayer, American citizen, American voter. Let's begin with the first video where this senior lobbyist, his name is Keith McCoy, just talks about how they use things like shadow groups to get what they want.
Did we aggressively fight against some of the science? Yes. Did we hide our science? Absolutely not. Did we join some of these shadow groups to work against some of the early efforts? Yes, that's true. But there's nothing illegal about that. We were looking out for our investments. We were looking out for our shareholders.
So Cenk, he says there was nothing illegal about what we were doing, which is actually true. And he also just bluntly states that they were looking out for their shareholders, because that's how this system works. These companies look out for their shareholders, not for the environment or for the good of the people.
That's the most obvious thing in the world. And we all but the mainstream media pretends that, oh, corporations making profits. That sounds conspiratorial. They're interested in that? Is that why they're giving campaign donations? The whole country right now is saying it with me. Of course! But there's an amazing look into how they think about it behind the scenes, which confirms everything we've ever told you on this show. So even in that first video, let's break down a bunch of things. First of all, he talks about how, well, of course we're, basically using shadow groups to fight the real science, right? They claim to publicly support action on climate change while undermining it behind the scenes. He thinks he's doing a job interview. So he's like, I'm really good at doing hatchet jobs for corporations like ExxonMobil, and I'll lie publicly and then tell you privately how I maximize profits for our shareholders by tricking the American public and buying off politicians. Now we're gonna get to the politicians in a second. I wanna give excellent, tremendous credit to Unearthed. That's Greenpeace's UK's investigative platform that did this. So bless their hearts for getting, and it's such a clever trick, because the minute they have money on the line, he thinks, oh, I'm gonna get a job that pays more. He's like, oh, I'll tell you all my dirty tricks, right? But now they asked ExxonMobil afterwards, hey, what do you say about this? And ExxonMobil says, we have supported climate science for decades.
Yeah, no,
that's exactly what he said you would say. Publicly, you'll say you supported it for decades while secretly undermining it. And then your talking point afterwards is a direct confirmation of what he says, okay?
That's exactly right. So he does touch on how ExxonMobil will use these hollow PR strategies publicly to make it appear as though this fossil fuel company is very much interested in doing what's right by the environment. They take climate change seriously, when in reality, they're advocating for things they know will not pass, probably because behind the scenes, they're lobbying to ensure they don't pass. And so the carbon tax is an example of that. Here he is talking about that very issue.
Nobody is going to propose a tax on all Americans. And the cynical side of me says, yeah, we kind of know that. But it gives us a talking point that we can say, well, what is ExxonMobil for? Well, we're for a carbon tax.
What you said was just really interesting. So it's basically never gonna happen, right? Is the calculation?
Yeah. No, it's not gonna, carbon tax isn't gonna happen.
So this helps me understand a little bit why suddenly a lot of US oil majors are talking about a carbon tax, because it sounds pretty.
Well, the cynical side of me, they've got nothing else. Yeah. So it's an easy talking point to say, look, I'm for a carbon tax. So that's the talking point. That is in my mind, an effective advocacy tool.
It's an effective advocacy tool because it's something that they don't have to worry about actually passing. So it's positive PR for Exxon. And I also want to just add one point about the context in which this conversation is taking place. As we've mentioned already, he thinks he's being interviewed for a job. And so this is the only time, possibly one of the only times, the only kind of context where in a job interview, you literally admit to the individual that you're lying to the public about what you really believe, but secretly you're working with nefarious groups to undermine any type of policy that would actually benefit the environment. Like the reason why he's talking so openly about this is because this is what the industry wants from one of these senior lobbyists for a fossil fuel company. They want someone who plays all of these tricks to get the most profits necessary for the shareholders.
Right, there's no question that that's what is in every interview. If you're a lobbyist, they're not hiring you to not bribe politicians effectively. They're hiring you to bribe and cajole and trick people. You don't have to trick the politicians, you just buy them. And he's gonna explain that in a minute. It's amazing, he's gonna name names, okay? But when it comes to the American public and the American media, the media is the suckers. They're the useful idiots. So they look at the carbon tax thing. He's saying, oh, it's smoke and mirrors, right? So we pretend to be for something that we know is never going to pass. How many times have we told you on the Young Turks? They pretend to be in favor of things that they know are never going to pass. And you tell the mainstream media, you tell the Washington Post, etc. They're like, that seems a little conspiratorial. I believe that the politicians are honest. Well, okay, if you suck at your job, you would believe that. It's over. It's definitive. Here he is telling it. Here's another trick that he mentioned in the first video. He says, oh yeah, we just hide behind the third-party groups like American Petroleum Institute. And they become the whipping boys. And then we get, so it's not ExxonMobil. Oh, we got nothing to do with it. Oh, this American Petroleum Institute. You can't connect it to any one company, right? So if you want to get angry at them, sure, get angry at them. Who cares? As long as you're not getting angry at ExxonMobil, who's actually doing the bribing of the politicians.
Exactly. So let's get to the heart of the matter, which is the bribing of the politicians. As we know, Biden just bragged about securing a bipartisan infrastructure deal with the involvement of Republican senators. It is an awful, watered down bill, which could potentially privatize about $100 billion worth of public infrastructure, meaning that Americans are gonna get slapped with all sorts of tolls and fees just to use the infrastructure that we've been using so far. We did a great story on that, you should check it out. But with that said, what are the inner workings of Congress, right? What kind of role does ExxonMobil play? And sure enough, this corporate lobbyist talks about that very issue and how they're basically defeating everything that we want included in that infrastructure bill. Let's watch.
We're playing defense because President Biden's talking about this big infrastructure package, and he's going to pay for it by increasing corporate taxes. You stick to highways and bridges, then a lot of the negative stuff starts to come out because
for you guys,
because there's a germaneness, right? That doesn't make any sense for a highway bill. Why would you put in a something on emissions reductions on climate change to oil refineries in a highway bill?
I mean, it's the exact talking point that we got from the Republican Party in response to Biden's infrastructure bill. Oh no, physical infrastructure. No, we don't want to do anything about climate change, physical infrastructure. And lo and behold, the bipartisan deal strips out any of the climate action provisions that were present in Biden's initial infrastructure proposal.
Yeah, and we told you ahead of time on this show that they were gonna strip out the green energy provisions, and they were going to only keep the provisions that allowed private corporations to profit off of the infrastructure bill. That's exactly what they did in the bipartisan compromise. And he brags at different times in this interview about, oh yeah, we do education of members of Congress. In other words, we write what they're supposed to say and then they say it. They said that they sometimes will even write floor speeches. So here, parrot. do as you're told. Here's a cracker, right? And so these are, what did we tell you 1,000 times on this show? They're not having actual debates. This is not about principle. When you tune into CNN and you read the New York Times and they tell you what Joe Manchin and Lindsey Graham thinks, they're participating in a false kabuki theater. It was never real. They're not having actual debates. They're taking money from ExxonMobil and then they're doing as they are told, sometimes quite literally. And so when ExxonMobil tells you, there ain't gonna be no green energy, because green energy hurts us. In another video, they got a couple of executives on this, right? They explain, well, if you do the green energy stuff, it might work, and then it'll be irreversible. Then it'll be hard for us to get our unfair, he doesn't say unfair, but he's get our advantage back, right? In other words, it's gonna work, and it's gonna help the American people. Don't do that.
Exactly.
Because we don't care about helping the American people. But guys, the core of this is, do they want to do this to maximize profit? Of course they do. Of course, ExxonMobil is not a charity, right? And yet every idiot that covers politics in America is like, oh, well, they give money to politicians, but we don't know why. What do you mean you don't know why? They do it, so the laws are written on behalf of corporations and not us. They have a fiduciary responsibility, which is the excuse they use over and over again, not only in the secret videos, but afterwards. They say, well, we didn't break any laws. And we have to maximize profit for our shareholders. We have a legal responsibility to do that.
But that's true.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to get rid of money in politics, because we legalize bribery. As long as you allow private citizens and corporations to pay unlimited money to politicians, they will pay unlimited money to get what? Financial return. Again, if you're an individual, it might be different. But if you're a corporation, you must maximize return. So you cannot give it these bribes, these legalized bribes to these folks, unless you think this is gonna make me lots of money, and often at your expense, including subsidies where they directly take money out of our pockets and give it to ExxonMobil. And now let's get to naming names, because there's a lot of bastards in here that you should know about.
Well, some of the bastards are individuals who have been fighting the infrastructure bill on the Democratic side. So let's hear what our good friend, senior ExxonMobil lobbyist Keith McCoy has to say.
Who's the crucial guys for you?
Well, Senator Capito, who chairs the Senate, who's the ranking member on Environment and Public Works. Joe Manchin, I talk to his office every week. He is the kingmaker on this because he's a Democrat from West Virginia, which is a very conservative state. So he is, and he's not shy about sort of staking his claim early and completely changing the debate. So on the Democrat side, we look for the moderates on these issues. So it's the Manchins, it's the Cinemas, it's the Testers. Other ones that aren't talking about is Senator Coons, who's from Delaware, who has a very close relationship with Senator Biden. So we've been working with his office. Matter of fact, our CEO is talking to him next Tuesday.
And you can see the influence of ExxonMobil throughout Joe Manchin's political career. In fact, during the Obama administration, he put out an insanely goofy ad where he was pretending to shoot Obama's cap and trade policy. Let's watch.
That's me, shooting the cap and trade bill, because it was bad for West Virginia.
I mean, not only does this corporate lobbying lead to bad policy decisions and bad votes by the likes of Joe Manchin, it even persuades them to put out insanely embarrassing and cheesy ads like that one.
Yeah, and so the two people he mentioned first were Capito and Manchin. They're both from West Virginia. Capito's a Republican, Manchin's a Democrat. But basically, they think they're the easiest to buy. Because they are. And he explains why too, that they have the excuse of pretending to be from a conservative state, but they're not actually serving conservative voters. They're serving ExxonMobil, a giant multinational corporation. In fact, they're robbing the people of West Virginia to serve ExxonMobil. And it's bipartisan. Capito does it, Manchin does it. And look, guys, look at the names he gave you. It's exactly the names we've been telling you. Okay, Manchin's easy, Sinema's relatively easy, and those are the first two Democrats he mentions. Oh, those totally in the back pocket of corporations. It's absolutely confirmed. Will the rest of the mainstream media going forward to say, oh, these are the politicians bought by ExxonMobil? No, they'll never say it. They'll pretend they have principles, right? But look at that name, Chris Coons. How many times have you heard his name on this show? You've heard me say over and over again, he's one of the most conservative, one of the most corporate Democrats in the entire country. And he's really important and influential because he's a senator from Delaware and one of Joe Biden's best friends. So Coons is a stalking horse in essence for what Joe Biden's actual positions are. You buy Coons and you partly buy Biden, okay? So I don't know any other show talking about Chris Coons. And it's so obvious, he's from Delaware. He was one of the top campaign advisors to Joe Biden. So when he goes out and votes against $15 minimum wage, that's Joe Biden saying, I never wanted it. I never wanted it. I wanted to serve my donors.
Exactly.
And he does it with ExxonMobil too. By the way, the whole list that he names in different parts of the video, Maggie Hassan, another corporate Democrat from New Hampshire. She's going to run in New Hampshire now, and she's kissing the ass of every corporation because she thinks that's the way to beat a popular Republican in New Hampshire. What a dumb idea. If you actually serve the people of New Hampshire, you'd have a better chance of winning. Going with this corporate strategy is a near guarantee that you'll lose.
But Cenk, I'm sure that the Democrats that lose in these elections are losing because of slogans like Medicare for all or defund the police. It's those things, right? Which is weird because progressive Democrats usually have an easy time getting reelected, whereas these corporate Democrats are the ones that always capitulate to corporate interests. They're the ones who usually lose, especially in the midterm elections. So let's wait and see what happens in 2022.
Yes, and so, by the way, he also named Republicans too, not just Capito, John Barrasso, John Cornyn, Steve Daines, and Marco Rubio. He also named Mark Kelly, who's a Democrat, okay? So, and what do we tell you about Marco Rubio? The most corporate Republican there is. That's why corporate media loves him. In my book, that is actually gonna come out at some point, I explain how corporate media, all these different quotes, Marco Rubio is definitely gonna win. Marco Rubio is one of the leading candidates in 2016. Oh, it'll be such a joke for Trump's not gonna win. Marco Rubio, our beloved corporate Republican, is gonna win. And then he got almost no votes because right-wing voters and left-wing voters don't want these corporate lackeys. The only reason why Democrats still vote for them is because they trust the New York Times and CNN and the lies that they are fed about how these are honest, principled politicians when in fact, they're just order takers. Now, I gotta give you two more quotes because they're absolutely devastating. So he says at one point, the same guy you're looking at here, you wanna be able to go to the chief of staff, he says. We need Congressman so-and-so to be able to either introduce the bill, we need him to make a floor statement, we need him to send a letter, you name it. We've asked for everything. So what did I tell you? They're just like, hey, water boy, here, come here. Here's a check. By the way, the Channel 4 that did this report traced checks back to Mark Kelly and others. Of course, ExxonMobil does it. They do it through American Petroleum Institute. Then there's the dark money. So when you see them speaking on the floor of the House or the Senate, sometimes it's literal words written by lobbyists. Yep. It's sickening. They're supposed to be the people's representatives. But last one is the killer quote. This describes all of American politics. He said, I make sure I get them the right information that they need so they look good. So we get them the talking points. Make sure, this is what you say, boy. They go, yes, sir. And you're gonna look good here. We're gonna pretend that you're doing something while you're secretly helping us. And then he continues. And then they help me out. They're a captive audience. He said, they know they need you and I need them. There it is, that's all of American politics. They need you because they need us, the lobbyist is saying, because we have the money. And they can't win without money, so we just bribe them, we just give them legalized bribes. America made it legal. Other countries, by the way, don't have it legal. You're not allowed to have private donations from corporations at other countries. Here in America, you could just funnel it through dark money groups. Over $1 billion in dark money groups in the last presidential election. So they're like, oh, so we just tell them what to say, and then they need our money, and we need their votes. The voters, the voters. So, look, the voters are not the suckers. The media are the suckers and the useful idiots, because they just go, oh no, Manchin and Capito and Marco Rubio, they're wonderful human beings who are, man, what do they think about the carbon tax? They don't think a goddamn thing except, where's my check, ExxonMobil? I'm gonna go betray my own voters because in America, we were so corrupt that we legalized bribery. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.